All right. I think we're still waiting for a few more people to join us, but it would be great to just, introduce yourselves in the chat box, especially for Amanda, who is meeting you all for the first time today. So it would be great to just, let us know like where you're calling in from, the name of your startup, and what you're excited to learn today.
Hi, I'm Kung Yi from My Dream Home. It's a social business addressing lack of affordable housing in Cambodia through the Lego Life Break. And what I really want to learn is how to measure the impact, especially on housing and how we keep track or report it to the investor, donors, or public in proper way.
Great.
Yes, thank you.
Nice to meet you. I see a message from Angela in the chat. Nice to meet you too, Angela.
Hello, Amanda. Nice to meet you too. Morning. And I think it's in evening over there, right?
Yes, it is. A little dark in here. Sorry.
Right. Which time zone are you calling from? From the Pacific or
No,
Eastern?
I'm Eastern.
Oh,
so
okay.
Yeah, so it's 8 p.m. here.
Right. Not too bad. 12 hours difference versus 15. Like, I mean, if you get the West Coast people, then it's, it's even worse.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for putting the time to share with us today. Yeah, looking forward to learn more from you.
Very happy to.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I see more messages in the chat box, so please keep the introductions coming. At this point, I would like to introduce our speaker for today. So we're very lucky to have with us the Global Director for Meal at Habitat for Humanity International, Amanda Woomer, who will share more about impact measurement and how you can use the concepts of impact measurement into your startups, and also, entertain any questions you might have about the topic, especially as you work towards all of your outcomes around affordable housing. So I'll let Amanda introduce herself a little bit more and the work that she does. And if you have any questions at any point, please feel free to type them up in the chat box, and then we can open up the floor for question and answer later on. So Amanda, it's all yours.
Great, thanks, Kath. And hopefully you can help me for any questions that come in the chat, since I won't be able to see it while presenting. So as she said, I'm Amanda. I work for the Terwilliger Center for Innovation and Shelter as part of Habitat for Humanity. And I am the Global Director for MEAL. And MEAL stands for Monitoring, Evaluation, Accountability, and Learning. So it's an acronym to, or a synonym to M&E or results measurement, or some of those other terms that you may have heard. But essentially, it's my job to work with our teams to help design programs and then monitor and evaluate them based on our objectives. So I've been working closely with Lizanne and some others to develop a framework for ShelterTech globally. And I'm also here as a resource for you all to help you measure your own impact based on what you're working on. So I'll go ahead and start with this slide. So when we talk about impact, of our work, we're talking about it at a couple of different levels. So we have impact at a personal or household level. Many of us are focused on household level products, so we will hopefully have an impact for that household. Also at the community level and the society or societal level. So these are the effects of our work at these levels. And I've provided a couple of examples here. I also have a cat who may pop in from time to time. Please ignore him. So the examples are at a personal or household level. You may be contributing to the empowerment of women or better educational outcomes for um, children. So we've worked with companies that provide, for example, solar lighting in a household. So kids are then able to study for longer. So they may be able to have improved educational outcomes. We've also worked with another startup in the Andean accelerator that is providing solar lighting in communities. And so women feel safer at night. At a community level, you may see improved wash infrastructure, and that's water, sanitation, and hygiene infrastructure for the community. That's an example. Or increased number of jobs available, or higher quality, higher paying jobs. And then at a societal level, when we talk about impact, we're often looking at whether the housing market is more responsive to, in this case, low income families who are looking to build or add to their homes. So in sum, impact is the value that you're creating for your customers and also your investors. I know all of us are eager to get additional investment so that we can continue doing the work. And my job is to help you and help the Terwilliger Center measure impact. And then in doing that, we're giving a voice to our customers. We're improving our understanding of their lives and their needs. And hopefully we're also ensuring that we contribute to positive social change. So this graphic right here is our internal theory of change, and it illustrates the impact that we are hoping to see. So starting from the left side of the screen, you see we're talking about how ShelterTech is supporting entrepreneurs like you and engaging stakeholders to do those 3 outcomes that are listed below. So we're hoping to help you all improve your business models, but also to get increased investment or increase the capital available for your startups and scale-ups. And below is outcome 3. So in addition to supporting entrepreneurs like you, ShelterTech is also working to engage ecosystem actors. So investors, other nonprofits, philanthropists who may be interested in investing in the housing space, particularly for low-income families. So we're also working on that in addition to the program that you all are going through right now. As a result of that, we're hoping we can improve the performance of startups and scale-ups like yours and increase the number of investors and other supporters who may be willing to give funding to entrepreneurs like you, with an overall goal of increasing the quality of life for low-income families and improving housing in communities more generally. And on the very right side of the page, you'll see the Sustainable Development Goals. So with all of this, we're hoping to contribute to these Sustainable Development Goals, including reducing poverty, improving economic growth, hope in some cases, helping with climate change actions and building sustainable communities. And so this framework helps us stay on track for what we are doing. And it also helps us communicate with potential investors to our programs, to you all, and others who may be willing to fund housing. oops, sorry. So why do we measure, why we as TCIS, why do we measure impact? We are measuring impact through supporting you all, the entrepreneur. And so we look at what the outcomes of that support are with ongoing monitoring. So we collect information from you all and from the larger ecosystem to understand how we can better support you, and how you are creating value for your customers. So if we go back to this graphic, we're collecting data on how we're helping you on this left side here improve your business model and hopefully get additional investments. And then what that means for your customers, and for their lives. So we're collecting data on that. And then we're using that data in this bottom row right here to then reach out to investors and others and encourage them to invest in housing and invest in entrepreneurs like you. Which is that box on the right there. We use the information to influence investors to say, hey, we've got these great groups of startups. They're doing so much. They're reaching a lot of customers. They're improving people's lives. We think you should invest in them and invest in housing more broadly. And so every investor is different. Some are more concerned with certain SDGs. Maybe they're more interested in climate change, or maybe they're more interested in poverty or women's empowerment. And so we're measuring this impact to get all the data that we can to influence those investors and funders and other organizations. And so in terms of the actual data we collect, sorry, I keep skipping ahead. We're looking at these indicators right here. So the capital you raise throughout this program from whatever source. We're also looking at the products or services you sell, including the percentage that are sold to low-income households, your revenue, your staff or employees. And then we'll also be looking at ways that you're innovating. And looking at these, if there's something that you think, oh, I really don't know how to measure that, I don't know what data I can provide. And I think the most common question is about the percentage that is sold to low-income households. You know, depending on your product or your service, that data may be hard to get. We're here to work with you to figure out what monitoring systems we need to put into place to make sure that you have that data. We're also going to share that data back with you, and I'll talk a little bit more about the process. But overall, this is helping us understand, again, the value that we provide to you, you know, the anchors, the ShelterTech program overall, and then also the value that you provide to your customers. So a little bit about the process, just the logistics, so you're prepared for that data collection from us. During your participation in ShelterTech, you'll get quarterly surveys, so every 3 months via email. And the first one will actually go out next week. You'll be asked to complete that survey within 2 weeks and then send that back to us. And what we will do is take that data, put it together, and share it back with you. So you'll be able to benchmark yourself against the larger ShelterTech cohort. You'll be able to see what everyone is doing, and you'll be able to use that aggregated data to perhaps better understand what you might want to change, where you're going with all of this. And it's also a good process for just building your monitoring muscle and getting used to submitting data and sharing data. And so I realize some of you probably are very used to that and some may be less used to it. So again, we're here to support you throughout that entire process. Any questions you have, any systems you need put in place. So I'm going to go to the next section, which is more about how you are measuring your impact. And I have a couple of slides, but then I'd really like to hear from you all to hear how you're already measuring impact or how you're thinking about it, or any questions you might have that we can follow up on. So why you should measure your impact. The biggest one I think that might be on the forefront of a lot of people's minds is attracting new investments. If you want to get new investors interested in what you're doing, it's best to have some impact data that you can share with them. And even if right now you're saying, I'm not ready yet to pitch to a bunch of investors, that's a couple steps away from me. Even planning for that and getting comfortable collecting the data will ensure that when you are ready to pitch to investors, that you have that on hand and that you've worked out the kinks and you're really familiar with the data that you have. Another reason is to ensure that you're creating value for your customers. So when we solicit feedback from our customers and get information from them, we make sure that we're meeting their needs and that we're creating value for them, which not only is good for them, but it's also good for you, the entrepreneur, because it ensures your business is sustainable. Each of you will have a very different measurement strategy. So there's no one template that you can put into place. You may be getting information from your customers differently. You may look for different kinds of information. But the important thing to keep in mind here is that we manage what we measure. So if you're not measuring your impact, you're not able to effectively manage it and focus on that and share it with others. Particularly like we're talking about investors. They're very keen to see evidence as part of their analysis of whether or not to give you all additional funding. So they want to know not only are you profitable, but are you profitable because you're able to serve your customers, and then how you might be contributing to certain impact goals. Like I mentioned, the SDGs, particularly gender equality, sustainability, and poverty alleviation. And so how can you actually measure your impact? I'm sure some of you are doing it already, and I really want to hear from you. But it's important that throughout this accelerator process that you start to develop your own impact measurement process. And we're here to help you with that so that you can attract additional investors and ensure you're creating value. A couple of ways that we have worked with startups like you all before is finding ways to solicit customer feedback. That can be a challenge depending on what you're selling and who your customers are. So, for example, some of our lead firm partners in the Philippines that we work through through our lab there, it's not easy to collect customer data. When they buy something, it's cash, there's no information collected. So we don't always know who the customer is. What we found is that by providing some kind of warranty or rebate or discount through purchasing a product where, you know, someone has to provide their contact information, their phone number, their name, we can solicit feedback from them either through surveys over SMS or having focus groups, something like that. Another way to measure impact is understanding the effects of your product or service on different aspects of life for low income families. So, for example, are you helping them save money because your product or service is a cheaper alternative? Are you helping them save energy? You know, it requires less cost or energy consumption. Does your product reduce greenhouse gas emissions as compared to another similar product? So all of these are really interesting metrics that you can collect and that investors really want to know about. And we can, again, support you in developing your measurement strategy, but those are just some examples. And this is really meant to be an introduction to you all to just get everyone thinking. One, to familiarize you with what TCIS will collect from you, but also to get us thinking about how we can support you going forward in developing your own impact measurement strategy. So with that, I know it was a quick high level overview. I'd really like to hear from you all now about what questions you have, either about the data that we will collect or about how you can better measure your impact, or if you have some really good examples of how you are doing that already, or you have some ideas that you want to maybe talk about. So I'll open up the floor with that.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda. So yeah, any questions from the group? Maybe also share your experience with data collection methods, impact measurement efforts so far. Would be great to hear from what you guys have been doing and where you need support and where we can help.
Does anyone feel like you are collecting impact data now already?
Hi, Amanda. Tim here. Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to ask you if there's any way you can do calculations on the carbon sink for various types of materials. So we've got, like ourselves, we use biocomposite material from a plant called Canaf. Kongi is using bamboo, right? Yeah, and there's different people, even plastics and all that would have an impact as well, right? But I know it's not easy to do the calculations because it involves everything from transportation and farming and harvesting and all that, and processing it. So is there a template or a model or something, a spreadsheet you can throw at us and we can plug in and play with it? I'm not sure.
I wish there was a spreadsheet we could use, but there are methods that we can plug into, and we do have some capability to support you with that. And I was just actually about to ask you, I saw that in the chat, the biocomposite building material, and like you said, the bamboo design. I think that's a great place for us to start moving forward, is to think about how we can get you connected with a way to measure that, because that's going to be a really great pitch for investors, is how carbon emissions you're saving. And with the bamboo, of course, that's really attractive in terms of sustainability. So we definitely want to plug you in with that, and we should talk more about that, but that's going to be a big pitch for you. And then I also saw on the side, where did it go? Billion Bricks with the affordable solar housing. That's another place where we can work towards figuring out something like how much energy is saved by using, I'm not very familiar with your product, but just in terms of solar, how much energy you're saving. And then going back to, is that allowing for families to have extra work or study time that we can measure? So those are both things that I think we need to work with you to develop a plan for what data do you need that would be helpful that you don't have yet, and how we can get those calculations so that you do have that, because it helps us report, but it's also really going to be helpful for you. Thanks, Tim. I see another question from Andrew in Myanmar. If we've been giving service to a tiny number of households, is it okay to talk to investors at that stage? I think so. I mean, I know Kath probably and your team probably have a lot to say on that too, but I think it's a good idea to probably start talking to investors, but also this is a great time to pilot your impact measurement framework. I didn't see what your product or service is, but let's say, for example, it's one of these other things where, you know, maybe we need to start getting the calculations about how much carbon emissions are saved, or maybe we need to look into things like if how women are empowered or kids have better health outcomes or whatever the case may be. This is a really good time when you have a small number to test that out, because you probably have more access to your customers and you don't have the high stakes yet, potentially of a much larger number of households being served, or you know, specific investors that you want to target. So I think this is a great time to start with impact measurement and to really fine tune that. I don't know. Do you want to add anything, Kath, or your team?
Yeah, I think Amanda, you kind of nailed it on the head, right? Especially with a small number of customers, I think it's also a good idea to kind of go deep with the stories and highlight those impact stories as a case for, you know, building more, you know, like building a more robust and I guess like a wider customer segment, right? So I think, as Amanda said, you know, collecting data at this point and highlighting that in some of your conversations, if you do want to target investors, might be a good way to start. Um, and I think, Amanda, I just wanted to go back to what Tim was saying earlier. I was wondering if maybe, you know, you guys could also help um, with maybe the latest numbers on, for example, like how much carbon emissions the construction industry has. And then that could be, you know, like a good way to kind of showcase the difference or the value proposition of some of the products in the cohort.
Yeah.
If there's any, you know, like latest numbers that we could use for some of their presentations further down the road, that might be useful for some of the startups in the cohort as well to access.
Definitely. I've also been working with Habitat on our climate change position. And so, depending on if you're talking about construction generally or housing, you know, that contributes 60% of greenhouse gas emissions. So, that's a great figure to throw out when you're talking to someone and can say, I'm helping to reduce that, especially in an emerging economy where you're really probably not contributing a lot now. But if you grow quite quickly and depending on what stage the country is at, you're in a prime place to help ensure that the carbon emissions never get to some extreme amount like they do in my home country of the United States. So I think that's a great point. And really figuring out your value proposition and your pitch of what investors can I target based on my product or service that are going to be really interested. So yeah, the sustainability, the climate change piece is key. Um, and I'm not entirely sure what everyone else is doing, but I'm sure there's some of you that are going to be able to pitch to the whole gender equality, STG, that piece of it, and getting set up with where you want to go and then what data you need is really important at this stage, even if you only have 10 household customers. And one thing I wanted to say too, with what Cass said, and I didn't really emphasize this in the presentation, but if you are at that stage where your customer base is much smaller and you're able to have a lot more contact, now is the time to get those stories. Because investors don't always care just about numbers, right? They want to hear about the stories of the family that you're helping. And so if now's a time where you can really engage with some of your customers, that's awesome to get that and document it. Of course, being very accountable to them, you know, we don't want to take someone's information or their photo or anything like that and share it without their permission. But it's a great time to really engage with them if that's where you're at in your journey.
Thanks. Do we have any other questions from the cohort?
Maybe from me, if
Sure, go
yeah,
ahead, Angela.
okay. So Amanda, a bit of my pain point is actually, you know, when we started, right? Like, you know, it's mostly middle class customers, right? And then of course there is the middle low customers, most that we're also helping. So to give you a sense, we have a bit of like, you know, the SMEs, we have the middle class customers because there's no right banking products for them, such as, for the rental or renovation financing or the down payment financing. And also we have the middle low customers, right? But like if you kind of total up all the number together, because the middle low customers, their ticket size will definitely be smaller due to their capacity constraint and their affordability and all that. Because of course the financing and the product got to match with their capacity, right? So my challenge has always been like, I mean, in for my own experience, I've dealt more and been taught more how to meet VCs as opposed to meet impact investors. And some of these VCs say that, okay, you should go to the impact one, because I think, from the VCs perspective, they always want something like, rocket, like hockey stick sort of growth, right? But for us, it's more like steady and resilient, and because we try to do responsible lending. But if we try to go to the impact one, somehow they feel that our middle low segment is not that strong enough. But the reason being why that is the constraint for us, right? It's also like, let's say for the middle low income, I think for the rental or for the renovation, we manage it just fine because it's kind of like a shorter term, how do you say, financing. But when we finance something like for the house purchase, in order to make it affordable for them, I need to stretch the tenor longer, right? And if we have such a strong, I mean, a long tenure, from the funder, I mean, the people who gives financing in our platform, because we're a fintech, right? A lot of them are also more hesitant because, well, it's so long. And then second, we always disclose who is our customers and all that. So my pain points would be like the reason why I can't cater to this segment more, it's because due to the longer term financing availability, to be honest. So it's a bit of like a chicken and egg for me. And somehow, like, I kind of need to enhance this part, obviously, to pitch on the equity side, but so that it becomes a stronger segment. But second, like, I know the fact that like why we can't be stronger in that segment is due to the debt financing funding part that can be available to those segments, because like, yeah, it tends to be longer. So that's my kind of sharing 2 cents really, Amanda, and hope you can give some feedbacks and how to go about that. Thank you.
So I would say a couple of things you could approach it with. TCIS has a micro build fund that provides catalytic capital to institutions that provide housing microfinance loans. And when you look at it, they definitely have longer terms. They're not as lucrative in some ways that of other kinds of microfinancing. But what we found is that they're actually less risky, because these people are putting a lot more money in, or potentially to their home. It means a lot more than some other economic segments. So even if it's lower reward in terms of the interest rate or things like that, and in your case, longer terms, it's lower risk. And so if you can combine that with looking at outcomes for those families, so what are they doing with the money that they're getting, and what does that mean for their well-being? Are you seeing improved health outcomes because they're building better wash functionality into their home, or better educational outcomes, or better actually long-term economic growth because maybe they're adding a room where they can do at-home business type of things? And so I would look into those outcomes, and this is where you can survey your customers, actually go talk to them. I know that's not as easy in today's COVID-19 world, but there's different things we can do to look at the outcomes that families see, and then that makes it much more attractive to investors, because there are a lot of investors that are accepting a lower reward when it comes with lower risk and these particular household level outcomes and impacts that we can look at.
Okay, so would you suggest that maybe we kind of do, let's say, a testimony from 5 customers or something like that, and talk and try to, summarize that, right? Like, yeah, as the major key points and all that, and and then push that angle in a sense, for the impacting. Yeah, because for us, like fintech, it's a bit easier. It's service, right? So we have the data of our customer where we have their contact points, and we are basically, with them throughout the tenure of the financing, definitely, and things like that. So for existing customers, yeah, it's definitely it's contactable and things like that. So yeah, that would be doable for our case and things like that. So yeah, thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, you're in a great place with that you have that information. And so we can work with you to figure out some way to get that customer feedback that includes what are the impacts that this is having in your life. And then you may find a way to more systematically measure that. And that'll be a great pitch for investors, depending on what those impacts are. Yeah, great. And I saw a question in the chat from My Dream Home. What investors really want to see the indicators in quantity or quality? I would say at first, the best thing to do is show some quantitative indicators. And there are a lot. Again, it depends on what the investor is focused on. If they're focused on economic growth and you're able to show how you're adding jobs and they're good quality jobs, that might be something to share with them. Again, if you're just showing, hey, everyone we sell this to, they're experiencing benefits in lower greenhouse gas emissions from the product or savings in energy that the family can use towards something else. Those quantitative numbers tend to be more attractive in some ways, at least at first glance, but I still think it's nice to be able to have, customer stories that you can point to that really, in addition to the immediate, oh, that looks great, they get to hear more about what that really feels like for the family. You also want to be able to say the quality of something. So not just saying, oh, I know, all of my customers are saving money on their energy bills because they have this solar option. What you really want to be able to say is how much savings, what are they doing with that savings? Because investors are going to want to dig more into that. But figuring out your value proposition, whether it's an SDG or some other framework that you can reference. And then, is there any model or framework for measuring impact of affordable housing? It depends on your impact that you want to measure and what you're looking at. So there are some frameworks out there, and there are a lot of ways people are measuring the SDGs. It just really depends on a couple of things, right? What impacts you think you have, how much resources you have to measure that. So again, Angela has customer data readily available. Everyone might not have that. And then you might not have, the time or money resources to do some big measurement project. But really, no matter how much time you have, how many resources you have in money or technology or customer data, there's something that you can do in whatever stage you're at. We just need to figure that out. So I don't want to list off models or frameworks because they may not be appropriate to your circumstance. And that's what I was saying. Everyone's impact measurement framework will be different because your products are different, your situations are different, what you have available to you is different. And then follow-up question from Andrew. We collect a list of people who would like to have our service. Is the question if is that a good idea or what to do with that if you already have it? If you want to unmute yourself, Andrew, you're free. You can follow up with that. I see.
Yeah, I think there might be some audio issues, Andrew.
Okay.
I see your mic is moving, but we don't hear anything.
If you want to add more in the chat, I think if the question is if that's a good idea.
Yeah. Is it more?
Okay. I think it is, even as a potential customer outreach practice. I think one principle of doing monitoring and evaluation is, though, we want to make sure we have a purpose for any information we collect from people, right? Because this is their personal information. You know, we want to make sure we're not infringing on someone's privacy, that we don't have a bunch of data that could be insecure somewhere, that's potentially lost. So anything we collect, we want to make sure we have a very clear purpose for it. So, for example, with the warranty or discount or rebate example I gave earlier in the presentation, that's a good way to get contact information from people. But you want to make sure, one, there's a benefit for them, and then two, that you actually need their contact information and you're not just collecting it to have it. So if there's a reason to, I think that's totally fine. And also if you can make sure the data is secure, and that there's a potential benefit for the people whose data that you're collecting. I hope that answers the question. You know, we're having some audio issues. Another question I see, what underlying impact evidence should we, oh, I think there might be a connection problem because I'm hearing a delay.
Yeah, I think there is a bit of a delay. So Andrew, if you have any additional things you want to ask or clarify, feel free to type that up in the chat box.
Can you hear me?
There, it's much better now, yes.
Okay, so like previously, like we did like test launch and we have been collecting feedback like every day. Like we got like 17 to 100 phone call, and like previously visiting our office. But we have not been able to provide more services because like we have reached our budget. So previously, like we collect data from people like the names, the camp name, and so on. Like we are not doing anymore because like we are not so sure we'll be providing service in the future. Yeah, so based on your suggestion, we have been thinking like we can collect data from the feedback because like we've been like contacting people because like they want to get our service because we have been trying to solve the pain of the people in Yangon, in Myanmar. So yeah, so because like we only provide like something like we have been providing service to very tiny networks like 10 to 20, and then we can show that this kind of data, like you know, people who are willing to get our services. And then other things like we have video because like we're like because like the look at media to a lot of interview to X because like we are kind of like very new and like trying to solve like very big problem in Yangon. Yeah.
So you bring up another point that's interesting, which I didn't think about until you were describing the situation, is that the idea of like a market research, or what maybe an M&E person like me would call a needs assessment. So let's say you have people that are interested in your service or your product, and you want to make sure, am I meeting their needs? Do I need to tweak my product? Do I need to, you know, develop a new product or expand my geographic reach? There is space to do that and collect that data, right? So from people who haven't necessarily bought it, but are interested or are potentially the people you want to target, getting the feedback from them about, would you buy this? What value would this add? Or even not even starting with the product, but saying, what housing need do you have? And getting that information. The thing I just want to make sure we keep in mind is that we're not always being extractive when we get that information, right? That we're sharing something back, or we're providing some benefit. And I've worked in lots of contexts where we share back data. So we did a study of customers of microfinance institutions in Kenya recently, and they provided their time and their information. And so we're sharing back that larger group of information. Sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's offering them a discount for a product you're already selling, or some other monetary compensation for participating. And you all know best what's appropriate for your context. And of course, we can help you with that. But that's another situation where they're not your customers yet, but they could be, and they may help you figure out how to best provide value for them. So that's great. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks.
I saw from Fazal, what underlying impact evidence should we design and embed in our operations? So again, the frameworks, it's really going to depend on where you think you will have some impact. So I think through this accelerator and through working together, we can talk about that a bit more and help you embed that into your program based on, you know, the product or service that you're hoping to sell and who you're hoping to reach. So I wish I had a one size fits all answer for that, but everyone is going to be very different. So let's continue talking about that. Impact investors compared to commercial investors. I think this kind of gets at what Angela and I were talking about, which is they're not just looking for the highest profit, right? They're willing to accept a lower return for the ability to say they're impacting whatever their interest is, and whether that's, you know, women's empowerment, sustainable development, economic growth. And so that's why we have to go beyond just your revenue figures. We need to think about other ways that you may be contributing to impact. And will we have a chance for a one-on-one workshop? I think we'll have to figure out with your schedule how to do that, but we do want to provide support for you all and help you answer some of these questions. And so whether that's another maybe smaller group workshop, I don't know what the schedule is like totally, but we'll figure out how we can provide support. And the surveys that are going out next week will go out via email. And it should be pretty straightforward and easy, but you'll have my contacts so that if there's a problem, you can let me know. And that's another example, you know, I don't want us to just collect survey data from you and it go into a black box and you never hear from it again. So we're going to be sharing that back with you. Great. I think I covered everything. If there's other questions I missed or anyone wants to go off mute. I know we only have 10 more minutes or so.
Fazal,
Amanda,
I think you.
Francis here.
Oh, okay, sorry. Go ahead, Francis.
Thanks, Kat. So hi, Amanda. I wanted to ask, because what we do is we provide, internet in low-income communities, and we use our Wi-Fi monetization platform to do so. Our key issue is that, you know, in terms of, let's say, looking at the impact, we could say that our impact is based on the number of users that we are able to connect. However, like some of them would be asking further data. For example, like if they ask further on education, in terms of jobs that we're able to give, things like this. But of course, we also have to balance that out with data privacy, not being able to, giving them the privacy of what they want to use it for. So how do we balance these two things together?
Yeah, I'm glad you're really thinking about data privacy. So in terms of those two things, let's say your hypothesis or your learning question is, I think that having internet access is going to improve educational outcomes for students, or it's going to help people find jobs. What you can do is find a way to survey those users. And so I think it's best in those cases to allow people to opt in. You could set something up where you're saying, hey, if you give us your contact information, that allows me to contact you about such and such thing. And you'll be able to then call or send an SMS survey or some other method where you can talk to people and get their feedback on what is having this service. What has it done for you? And so I think in the case where you have a very specific idea, you can do something like a quick survey over the phone or in some other manner. But if what you're thinking is, oh, I've provided this service, I kind of have an idea of the benefits that it's having for people, but I kind of don't really know necessarily, doing some more in-depth conversations would probably be helpful to start. You know, a smaller group of people, a smaller number of people, and ask them, hey, what's been the benefit to you of having this service available? And you may hear things that are surprising. You may hear things like people feel more connected to their family, that they can now email or whatever, in different areas. Um, so it depends on where you are with that. But I think there are ways, if you are looking at specific outcomes or impact related to education or jobs, that you can allow people to opt in to sharing. And maybe you say, I'm going to give you a credit if you participate in this survey, a small credit, so you get additional access. I'm not sure how your service is set up, but that's an option that we've done with people we've surveyed, where we'll send them a phone credit to participate in an SMS survey. So I like where you're going with the privacy. We definitely want to balance what we're asking for with what it means for the people who are responding, the burden it puts on them, whether that's time or money, or the risk of collecting the data. But it sounds like we probably have some options there that'll help you get to that next level. So not just people served by internet access, but what they're actually getting from that access.
Thanks, Amanda. That's very clear.
Great. Thanks, Francis. Faisal, I think you unmuted yourself earlier. If you have any other questions or comments.
Oh yeah, so we sort of started with an activity to do logic model for our business. Right. So yeah, the input process, the output, outcome, and impact, right? So yeah, I think would love to have a session to get feedback on it, and then yeah, again, like maybe using that as a base, and then see what kind of qualitative or quantitative data that we need to embed in our operations, that might be useful for either for business partners, clients, or even investors moving forward.
Great. I love to hear that. I'm a big fan of mapping things out with a logic model, or sometimes people refer to them as a theory of change. Um, I would say mapping that out is really helpful, especially when you know to these kinds of impacts you want to see, and how you're going to get there, and making sure you kind of have all the pieces to get to that impact. But another reason I like them is it helps us identify what I call key transition points. So let's say in Francis's example, I think in my logic model, you know, I'm providing this internet access, and then students are using it to gain access to research materials, and it's improving their grades. And we've mapped that out on a logic model. And this key conversion point is, for example, the step from they're doing research to they're getting better grades. Because maybe I'm just imagining here, but maybe with Francis's service, he can see that they're, you know, anonymous data, but that people are accessing research sites. So you can see that people are doing that, but then you don't know, are they actually improving their grades? And so this is when we might be able to survey customers, or talk to them in more depth to check, is that key conversion point from one step to the next, is it actually happening? And so when we make logic models, we're able to see where those steps might be that are kind of like our test cases, our hypothesis that we're trying to test in doing what we're doing. So I'm glad to hear you're working on that. And yes, let's look at it and see what makes the most sense. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Faisal. I think we have a few minutes left. I know it's getting darker and darker at Amanda's. So any more questions from the group?
Okay, well, if there aren't any, I'm really excited to hear what you all are doing. I'm looking forward to hearing more. Sounds like a lot of impactful ventures in this group. And so just a reminder, we're here to help. And I think we've talked about some ideas already, but we're definitely here to help you. And then you all will be receiving our survey next week. And if you have any questions or any technical glitches or anything like that, please let us know. And we'll be continuing to speak.
Great. So before we end the call, as always, I'd like to ask everyone to turn their cameras on, and we'll have a quick group photo.
Oh, it's nice to see everyone.
Zara, if you're there, you just briefly turn your video on and we can take a quick photo with everyone. Okay.
Hi.
All right, smile. 1, 2, 3. Great. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
So we will be sending, email reminders, and once the survey is ready, we'll send that out as well. So if you have any questions that you would need to pass on to Amanda, please feel free to let us know. And Amanda, is it okay if I share your presentation to the group?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, great. So we'll upload that on our Mighty Networks group, and we'll also let you guys know of any other announcements and updates on Telegram. All right.
Thank
It's
you
Friday,
all.
so thank you everyone, and happy almost weekend. It's the last day of the work week. So we'll all be in touch over email, Telegram, and Mighty Networks. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Bye all. Have a
Thank
good
you.
one.
Bye.
Thank you.